What happens when the past refuses to stay buried, clawing its way back into your life through the most unexpected of moments? Can a man, who's built walls of steel around his heart, survive the tremors of emotions he thought were long dead? And what if the one person who dares to cross that line is someone he never saw coming? Someone who holds a mirror to his pain and his redemption. In a world ruled by control, power, and unspoken wounds, a single encounter can fracture everything. One unexpected dance. One forbidden smile. One fragile child caught between the silence of a broken father and the grace of a woman haunted by her own shadows. Can the rhythm of the heart break the silence of a soul? Don't blink. The dance is about to begin, and it may change everything. Knox Wilder had built his empire with nothing but grit, intellect, and a brutal refusal to fail. At 33, he stood at the helm of a billion-dollar enterprise, every decision, every risk, every triumph meticulously calculated. In his world, chaos had no place. Everything was controlled, orderly, predictable. Except for the wreckage of his heart. Once, there was Olivia. The woman who walked into his life like a dream, graceful, elegant, a vision that seemed too perfect to be real. They were the golden couple, envied by many, untouchable in their harmony. Or so he believed. The illusion shattered the moment he discovered the truth. Olivia wasn't just unfaithful, she was treacherous. She and one of his most trusted business partners had plotted behind his back, not just to steal his heart, but to rip his legacy apart. The betrayal was surgical. Cold. Calculated. Just like her. He nearly lost everything. His company. His name. His soul. In the bitter aftermath of their divorce, Knox didn't just sever ties with Olivia, he severed ties with love itself. What was the point of vulnerability, when it only opened doors to ruin? From that moment on, Knox Wilder became a fortress. No one got in. No one got close. And the world soon learned, he didn't forgive, and he sure as hell didn't forget. The only flicker of light in his life was Valentina. 5 years old, with curls like dark silk and eyes too old for her age, Valentina was his daughter. And his greatest failure. He gave her everything, private tutors, toys that filled rooms, a mansion that echoed with silence, but the one thing she needed most was the one thing he didn't know how to give. Connection. She rarely smiled now. Barely spoke. Her laughter, once a daily melody in the Wilder estate, had vanished like smoke. Knox tried. God, he tried. But every time he reached out, she pulled away, retreating into books, into drawings, into a world where he couldn't follow. And then, there was Ivy Quinn. The cook. To Knox, she was just another employee, a young woman with quiet eyes and a presence so unobtrusive, she was practically invisible. She came with glowing references, a clean background, and a resume that didn't raise questions. Efficient. Professional. Distant. Just the way he liked it. But Ivy had her own storms. She used to dance, once upon a time, under the blinding lights of theaters, with dreams that soared as high as her pirouettes. But life had other plans. Orphaned young, burdened with a younger brother who depended on her, Ivy had buried her dreams beneath bills, jobs, and survival. Ballet became a ghost, one she didn't dare awaken. Now, she cooked for strangers in a house filled with luxury and loneliness, pretending that was enough. She kept to herself. Focused on the kitchen. Never lingered, never intruded. Yet behind her calm, warm demeanor was a will forged by hardship, a fire that refused to die, no matter how cold the world became. Knox barely noticed her. Valentina barely noticed him. And somewhere in between them, the silence grew louder. Until one day, everything changed. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the Wilder estate, casting golden patterns across the marble floors. Knox had returned early from a meeting, a rare occurrence, but the tension in his chest refused to let him stay in the city another second. There was no emergency, no crisis, and yet something had pulled him home. As he moved through the quiet halls, footsteps soft against the cold floor, a flicker of motion outside caught his eye. Through the glass doors leading to the garden, he saw it, no, her. Valentina. She was dancing. Knox froze, breath caught mid-air. His daughter, who hadn't so much as smiled in months, was spinning in the grass, her tiny feet uncertain but full of life. Laughter spilled from her lips, light, airy, real. It hit him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't heard that sound in so long, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. And beside her, Ivy. The young woman moved with a grace that was impossible to ignore. Each gesture, each motion, seemed to glide through the air, her body in perfect rhythm with Valentina's. Ivy wasn't just playing around, this wasn't mere imitation. It was art. It was discipline. There was a fluency in her movements that could only come from years, a lifetime, of mastery. Knox's eyes narrowed. What the hell is going on here? His fingers tightened against the glass, jaw clenched as a strange heat coiled in his chest, something between confusion, anger, and awe. Valentina beamed up at Ivy, her cheeks flushed, arms raised as she tried to mimic her. Like this? She giggled. Ivy laughed, her voice warm. Almost. Keep your back straight, there you go. Just like that. Knox couldn't take it. Minutes later, Ivy barely had time to wipe her hands on her apron before she heard his voice, sharp, cold, cutting through the air like a blade. What exactly do you think you're doing with my daughter? She turned, startled, but didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, calm, steady. There was no fear there, only clarity. She wanted to dance, Ivy replied softly. I couldn't say no. Not when she needed someone to listen. His gaze hardened. You're a cook. Not her tutor. Not her. Not her mother. She interrupted, her voice still gentle, but laced with something stronger beneath. I know. Silence crackled between them like electricity. You crossed a line, he growled, stepping closer. Ivy didn't back down. Maybe. But if crossing that line brings her joy, I'd do it again. Knox was speechless. This woman, this employee, had just stood her ground in a way that made him feel off balance. Unsettled. But more than that, he couldn't shake what he'd seen in the garden. That laughter. That life. That connection. It gnawed at him. That night, Knox sat in his study, the glow of his laptop illuminating the shadows around him. He typed her name, Ivy Quinn, into the search bar, expecting to find little, if anything. But as the screen flickered to life, article after article appeared. The rising star of ballet, Ivy Quinn stuns audiences in New York premiere. A prodigy in pointe shoes, Ivy Quinn's breathtaking performance leaves critics speechless. Where did she go? Ballet's brightest talent vanishes without a trace. His breath hitched. 7 years ago, Ivy had been the name on every critic's lips. Revered. Celebrated. A future carved in gold. And then, nothing. No scandals, no drama, no farewell performance. She simply disappeared. Knox leaned back, staring at the screen, a storm brewing behind his eyes. Why would someone with that kind of talent walk away? And more importantly, why the hell was she cooking in his kitchen now? The moment Valentina declared she wanted to enter a dance competition, Knox felt like the ground beneath him cracked open. No, he said firmly, standing tall in his office, his voice like steel. "It's a waste of time." Valentina stood across from him, small hands balled into fists, eyes shimmering with defiance. "I want to dance, Daddy. I need to." Those words lingered in the air long after she stormed out, and Knox sat in stunned silence, wondering when his 5-year-old learned to wield words like swords. It was Ivy who didn't back down. "She has something to fight for now," she said quietly that evening, hands folded in her lap, eyes unwavering. "Don't take that from her." Knox didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning, Ivy and Valentina began to train. The transformation was immediate and undeniable. Ivy was not the gentle cook in the kitchen anymore. On the makeshift dance floor of the Wilder Estate sunroom, she became something else, fierce, focused, relentless. She drilled Valentina with precision, but every correction was wrapped in warmth, every tough moment laced with encouragement. Again, Ivy would say, voice calm but firm, "You can do better. I know you can." Valentina, who once shied away from everything, now danced with fire in her steps and determination in her eyes. Her laughter returned. Her spark reignited. And Knox. He watched. At first from the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. But soon, he found himself staying longer, leaning closer, his gaze drawn to Ivy more than he cared to admit. He saw it in the way she guided Valentina's hands. In the way she celebrated small victories with quiet pride. In the way she believed in the little girl, who had once stopped believing in herself. And for the first time in years, Knox felt something shift inside him. One night, after a particularly intense rehearsal, Ivy stayed behind in the kitchen, wiping down counters long after everyone else had gone to bed. Knox entered silently, drawn by the low hum of her presence. "You didn't have to stay this late," he said. She didn't turn. "I'm used to late nights." There was a pause, thick, heavy. Then Knox spoke again, quieter this time. "Why did you stop dancing?" Ivy froze, hands stilling on the cloth. Slowly, she turned to face him. Her eyes searched his, as if trying to decide how much truth to give. "I didn't want to," she said finally. "But I had to." He said nothing, waiting. She took a breath. "I lost my parents young. It was just me and my brother, Caleb. Dancing was our escape, our dream. I made it to the stage, but when he got sick, everything changed. He needed me more than the spotlight did." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "After he passed, I couldn't go back. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like ours anymore." Knox's chest tightened. For a man who had lived through betrayal, through silence, through the hollowness of a broken home, her words were like shards, cutting straight to his core. "I'm sorry," he said, and it wasn't just for her loss. It was for everything, for not seeing her before, for assuming she was just a cook, for every wall he had built to keep the world out. Days turned into weeks. Training intensified. And so did something else, something neither of them dared name. Knox watched her more closely now, not just with curiosity, but with something deeper. He admired her strength, her resilience. The way she had carved light out of darkness. The way Valentina ran to her, trusted her, loved her. It became clear. Ivy Quinn wasn't just part of his home. She was part of his life. One night, as Ivy was gathering her things to leave the kitchen, Knox appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak right away. Just watched her, every nerve in his body on fire. Then, he stepped closer. "I've lost too much in this life," he said softly, his hand reaching for hers. "But I'm not losing this. Not you. Not Valentina." His fingers wrapped around hers, warm, strong, trembling. You're not just someone who works here. You're family. Ours. Ivy's breath caught. Her heart raced. She wanted to believe him, but fear clung to her like a second skin. Knox, She faltered, emotions swirling in her eyes. He leaned closer, voice low, urgent. Let me choose you. Let me fight for this. I won't lose you too. The auditorium was electric, filled with rows of anxious parents, curious spectators, and the bright lights of a stage that seemed too vast for a 5-year-old to conquer. Knox sat in the front row, his heart thudding in his chest as Valentina stood behind the curtain, clutching Ivy's hand. She looked up at Ivy, eyes wide with nerves. What if I mess up? Valentina whispered, her voice trembling. Ivy knelt down, brushing a curl from the girl's cheek. It's not about being perfect, Valentina. It's about telling your story. Show them how you feel. That's all that matters. Knox watched from a distance, something twisting inside him as he saw the trust in Valentina's eyes, the kind of trust he'd been chasing for years, but never knew how to earn. When the music started, Valentina stepped onto the stage and danced. Every step was raw emotion. Every spin, every leap, a burst of life reclaimed. The auditorium fell silent, mesmerized by the little girl with the trembling hands and the fearless heart. Knox couldn't breathe. He had never seen his daughter shine like this, so alive, so free. When the music ended, the applause was thunderous. Valentina didn't win first place. Another child with perfect technique took the trophy. But when the judges announced a special honor, for most expressive performance, Valentina's name echoed through the room. She clutched her award, beaming, and for the first time in so long, she didn't need anything more. She had danced her way back to herself. Later that night, the house was quiet again. Ivy stood in the kitchen, her suitcase by the door. Her fingers trembled as she zipped the final pocket. She couldn't stay. Not after everything. Her heart had gone too far. I'm not one of them, she whispered to herself, blinking back tears. I don't belong here. She reached for the handle, then froze. You're not going anywhere. Knox's voice cut through the silence, rough and urgent. She turned, startled. He stood there, eyes locked onto hers, breath shallow. Knox, No. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing her hand before she could retreat. Don't walk away from us. Her eyes filled. I'm just a cook. This isn't real. You'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. Knox's hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away the tear that slipped free. You're wrong, he said, voice thick with emotion. I've made mistakes. Too many. But not this. Not you. Don't leave me. Don't leave Valentina. You are our family. The words shattered her. Ivy's knees buckled, her breath breaking. And in that moment, she realized, she didn't have to run anymore. She had a place. A home. Someone who saw her. Someone who chose her. And a little girl who loved her like a mother. Spring arrived quietly, washing over the Wilder estate with the scent of blooming jasmine and soft breezes that whispered promises of new beginnings. For the first time in years, the house no longer echoed with silence, it was alive with laughter, music, and the sound of little feet dancing through the halls. Knox no longer watched from a distance. He stood with them now, shoulder to shoulder with Ivy, hand in hand with Valentina. The boundaries he had once guarded so fiercely had fallen, piece by piece, replaced by something he had long forgotten how to feel. Love. Trust. Belonging. Knox no longer cared who saw it. No more hiding behind cold suits and colder words. He reached for Ivy's hand in front of everyone, his staff, his business partners, the world, and she didn't pull away. In the garden where it had all begun, Ivy turned to him, eyes shimmering with quiet wonder. "This feels like a dream," she whispered. Knox shook his head, drawing her closer, his voice low and certain. "No. Dreams fade. You're real. And I'm not letting go." Ivy smiled, her heart finally at rest in the place it was meant to be. Valentina flourished. Her days were filled with dance, her nights with stories and love, no longer retreating into a world of loneliness. She twirled around the living room, her giggles lighting up every corner, her arms reaching for Ivy as naturally as they reached for Knox. One evening, as the three of them sat watching the sunset from the patio, Valentina crawled onto Knox's lap and whispered, "Daddy, can Ivy stay forever?" Knox looked at Ivy, his eyes soft, full of unspoken emotion. Then he kissed the top of Valentina's head and said, "She already has." In the end, Knox Wilder didn't need control. He didn't need power. All he needed was what had been beside him all along, a little girl's love, a woman's grace, and a home filled with the kind of joy money could never buy. This time, his heart had chosen right. And he would never let it go.